All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Jen Buchanan. I'm here with Future Anything for our live learning session with today's topic. So you want to start your own school. What a great topic to be exploring. I know I've certainly thought of that on many occasions. Before I get into today's session, I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people here in Naarm, also known as Melbourne, and would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any First Nations people joining us today. And across Australia, we are meeting from many different lands where we live, work and play. And just as we're waiting for a few people to join us from the waiting room, I'd love for you to jump on the chat and just share in the comments section there where you're joining us from today. So, question out there. We posed this question and we said, asked you, have you ever thought of starting your own school? And I reckon there's many of us on this call today that at one stage or other had thought about, yeah, you know what, I'd like to give it a crack and see what it's like. Well, today I am delighted to bring in 3 trailblazers who have done exactly that. They've successfully started their own schools. And in a moment, we'll hear from each of them. They'll briefly just share who our 3 guests are and where their schools are located. So the first person we're going to hear from today is Imogen Hunt. And Imogen first opened Peregrine School in Tasmania, just south of Hobart there in 2000. And she opened it with 14 students. And since then, the school has grown to over 120 students in K to 10. Imogen will shortly share a little bit more information around this beautiful school. Brett, I had the fortune of heading up there a couple of years ago to go and visit Brett Wood at Music Industry College. And Brett opened this school, I believe in 2008 with 26 students. And this was in the Fortitude Valley. And since then, the school has grown to over 90 students that, with alumni of graduates, including Thelma Plum, who also was it? Sahara Beck, Creed the Kid. It certainly has an impressive lineup of graduates. And John Stewart, I've known John for many years. Our connection began back at Green School in Bali. And in 2020, I remember speaking to John and he talked about the living school that he had opened in Lismore, a progressive school with a focus on a love of learning. So opened with 78 students and it has quickly grown to more than 240 students in K to 11. I'll begin today with introducing and inviting each of our guests to share a little bit about their school, and then we'll move into a Q&A. So I would love you as our audience today, if you've got any questions for any of our guests today, just to pop them in the chat function, and I'll be monitoring this chat function and be able to bring those questions into the conversation. So please feel free to populate that chat with any questions that may pop up. But without further ado, enough from me, let's get started. And I'm going to hand the platform here, our virtual world, over to you there, Imogen, in Tasmania. And I'd love for you to start by just sharing a little bit of your story and this Peregrine School.
Thanks, Jen. Our school really started more as a sort of grassroots group of people who were looking for something for their own children, rather than from a philosophical standpoint from one or group of educators. So perhaps a little bit different from that perspective. As Jen said, we started in 2000 and we started with 14 students, and in a small house on a rural property. We're about 40 minutes south of Hobart. We all had young children at that time who were about 5 years old. And we had them at one of the 2 local schools in the area. And we're just finding that things were not quite going the way we really wanted things to go for our children. So as a teacher myself, I guess was one of the people who were formulating the ideas of what this school might look like. I had the privilege of attending a very small progressive school myself as a student, if you believe, in the mid-70s. in New South Wales. And so I only actually attended that school for 3 or 4 years, but it had a powerful effect on me in terms of what it's possible for young people to do when they're given support and freedom to follow and find their own path. And so I guess that really did inform the beginning of what we wanted at Peregrine. I guess some of the things that were really important to us were that the children were part of a very small and nurturing community, that there were strong connections. So I guess a focus, in today's language, a focus on well-being wasn't the buzzword at the time. We wanted the students to be part of mixed age groups, and at the time, obviously 14 children, one group. We wanted learning experiences to be as authentic as possible. So we did some things like, from the very, very beginning, making the lunch program part of our school program. And so the children actually were involved in preparing their morning tea and their lunch with support right from the very beginning. I guess some of the other things that were important to us at the time were a trust in children's, as I said, a trust in children's desire to learn. And that meant really making sure that we were giving them lots of opportunity for choice, but supporting them to plan their own and monitor their own program. Really focusing on, a lot of the children were young, so a really strong focus on the value of play. And of that exploratory phase of learning without necessarily having outcomes in mind. The other thing that was important to us was a real trust in young people's capacity and a belief that they could be part of decision making in the school. So the school, in the framework of the democratic schooling movement. Some of you would know about Summerhill in England, a democratic school that has been going for just over 100 years now. So in that tradition, I guess, we have a morning meeting. We still do have a morning meeting where all of the students are part of that. Beginning of the day, it's the setting of community where we're all together, but it's also an opportunity for children to have a real voice, to make suggestions, to bring up issues, to solve issues together. We also really believe in giving them real responsibilities. The children actually clean the school. We don't have any cleaners at all. The last 10 minutes of the day, everybody's got a job, and we go through from cleaning the toilets right to sweeping the floors. Freedom to play. We're in a rural setting. We have a bush setting, so the children are able to play unsupervised in the bush. There are parameters. We're not reckless, but there is substantial freedom. But I guess in terms of learning, our approach has really been to provide support and opportunities and provocations, and to support the students to make choices for themselves. And that's very much still the case today. So we're now, as Jen said, at about 110. Very different. I think one of the things that we've had to do as the school has grown from 14 to 110 is continually try to find new ways to maintain our values. So community is a very strong value, but as soon as it's one of our very strong values, and it's easy when you're 14, you're all one group, it just happens by default. But once you get to 50 or 60, and certainly by the time you get to 100, you have to think about how you're going to actually create those structures intentionally to keep that connection. So some of the ways we do that are our mentor group structure. I know mentor groups are quite common in lots of schools, but I think perhaps what's different about ours is that each of the children in the primary school from 4 years old to 12 years old belong to a mentor group of about 12 children, and they spend the first hour of every day in that group, in that mixed age, kindergarten to grade 6 group. And it's a genuine part of their day. they sit at a table together and eat lunch together. They have a responsibility for the jobs together. So it's those ways that we've found to keep that connection to community.
Love that. Thank you so much, Imogen. There is a question that's just popped up in the chat, and we might come back later on and revisit this and having a look at the benefits that you see as a result of mixed age grouping in an educational setting. So I'll let you hold that there and ponder an answer, and then we'll come back more into the Q&A and explore some of these questions. But I do put it out there to anyone that's visiting Hobart, a visit or a call out to Imogen and go and visit this site, because it is a stunning, beautiful place to immerse yourself in. So thank you so much. And I'm going to move the platform over to you there, Brett, in Fortitude Valley, and would love to hear a little bit more about Music Industry College, please.
Okay, well, you gave me some questions to kind of some scope to talk about. So the inspiration for the school, I kind of suffer incredibly from imposter syndrome because I'm a PE teacher by trade. So running a music college is a really interesting shift. I also was never a head of department or a deputy in any of the schools I worked in. So I went from being a regular garden variety PE teacher to running my own music college. So there you go. That's kind of crazy. But in the middle of that, I started a youth centre, a drop-in centre for kids who couldn't go to school or wouldn't go to school. And that started out as one night a week, then went into 2 nights a week, just a drop-in centre. And then we started attracting some government funding for kids to keep them, actively engaged and hopefully get them employed and turn their whole lives around in 6 months, because that's how the government funding cycle works in the youth centres, which is a bit unrealistic. But we found that music was the key to keeping the young people engaged. So we had, we had a recording studio. We started with a live music venue and started running live music events at the youth centre, and we would get, regularly 350, 400 kids to one of those events, live bands. This is in Browns Plains, so low socioeconomic outer suburb. It's in Logan. If you're in Sydney, probably the Mount Druitt kind of area, Western Sydney. If you're in Melbourne, I'm probably thinking Frankston. Not that familiar with things around Tasmania or other areas of the country, but that gives you some kind of context. And then that grew, and then we started a recording studio. We added a radio station, a narrowcast station, and then we started running an annex of the local high school, Browns Plains State High School, where I had taught for 11 years. And we started doing an Access 10 program, so just literacy and numeracy up to year 10 level. We couldn't get rid of these kids at the end of the day. We would basically almost physically have to carry them out of the facility because they just wanted to stay. It became their home, became their safe place, became somewhere where they wanted to be, part of a community. And we ran that for a few years, and I had this crazy idea, well, why don't we make this a school? And so, Browns Plains is not the most desirable suburb in Brisbane for people to bus their kids to a school. So I had this idea of, let's put it in the centre of the city where people can access. And why don't we put it right in the heart of the music industry, which is Fortitude Valley. Now, if you don't know Brisbane at all, the valley, its history is very similar to King's Cross in Sydney. So, I always say they should do an underbelly about Brisbane because it'll be scarier than any of the other cities because it's got a shady past. So parents of my generation or people of my generation with kids are like, I'm not sending you to school in the valley, but it worked. So in 2010, we kicked off with a school focused around students who wanted a career in the music industry. We started in the PCYC, the Police Citizens Youth Club. We had one room that was ours 24/7. My office, I shared with 2 other people, our business manager and our receptionist. It was a converted storage cupboard. Our staff room was divided by, those black room dividers. So that was sectioned off from the main classroom. So our staff really had no privacy at all. And then we hired one other room. We started with 27 kids, and that room we had to set up and pack down every day. Then we grew from 27, jumped to 46, jumped to 60, and went, well, hang on, we're running out of space here. And the PCYC were kind of, a bit over us being there because we were impinging on a lot of their space. And to their credit, they built another room on their basketball court for us. So, basketball's out, but they hadn't done much of that because they had moved to another centre. And then they talked about demolishing their facility and we'd have to find another home. So we went and sourced another building, and we moved even closer into the heart of the valley. And we've now got 2 buildings, and we've got 92 students, and we're capped at 90. Goes back to what Imogen was saying about community. It's one of our key pillars of our school. And it's loosely based on Dunbar's number of 150, if you know that anthropological study, where, you know, tribes beyond 150 become problematic, and another chieftain rises up and, you know, tries to go stabby on the other chief and splits the tribe. And I don't want anyone going stabby on me. So, you know, we'll just leave it at 90. That suits me perfectly. But I going back to what Imogen said, I much preferred it when we had 27, because, you know, when you know every kid, and I know every student now at the school, but not as well as I knew 27 of them. Like 27 is a really sweet spot, but that's okay. We work well with 90. We've been in operation since 2010. So this is our 14th year. We've probably had probably 600 odd students through the school over those 14 years. As Jen said, we've had a couple of, you know, high performing music industry, like Thelma's had 7 ARIA nominations. Sahara Beck played Glastonbury this year, did a stage show on the south end of London in the cabaret format, and she's just about to go gangbusters. She'll be a household name before you know it. But it's not really about that. Our school was really about giving students who weren't fitting in at their current school a place to fit. So, you know, if you've all worked in schools, you know, the creatives are kind of, you know, they're smiled at, but they're like, you know, better study in maths and science, get a real job, okay? Because, you know, the arts, no one knows how to make money out of that. Well, we do. There's lots of money in that. In actual fact, music industry is about the 4th largest industry in this country. It's bigger than sport, go figure, but no federal government or state government will give more money to music than they will to sport. So we just do our own thing. And so that's who we attract, kids who want a career in the industry. We attract students from the top end private schools through to kids who are at, you know, the wackiest independent schools, everything in between. We've got a student currently in our graduating class who is from Perth. We had a family move back from Holland to Australia just so their son could attend the school. We've searched high and low. There's 2 of us in the world. There was one other school like us who does music-specific education at a high school level, and they're based in St. Paul, Minneapolis. And we're currently doing a documentary with them, collaborative with their students. So our students are working on that. That kind of makes us what we're unique. We're the only school in the country who has a registered nightclub on site. So that's kind of unique. It's not licensed, before you get excited, not licensed. Yeah, so that's pretty much us.
Love it. Thank you so much, Brett. And just to highlight in the chat there, Nicole's just popped in the chat. If you want to read more about the music industry story, there is a link there to buy Brett's book, and all of the sales from that book actually go to the Ken Wood Scholarship Fund to support future students at MIC. So thank you so much. And we'll come back again with some questions later in this live learning series. I'm now going to hand over to my friend, John. John and I, as I said in the beginning, we met at Green School. John, I don't know if I can believe this, but it was already 8 years ago. Here we are today on our live learning, and I'm super excited to be able to share with our audience your journey there at Living School. Over to you, John.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Well, actually, I don't know how I'm coming across because I'm sitting on the side of the road. I've got the year 9s on a challenge camp out the back of Springbrook. And yeah, I've just dumped them and had to drop off the camp trailer and find a place with 4G. So it's great to chat. This shows technology and linking in. I've loved listening to Brett and Imogen. So yeah, my story is, as Jen said, I was kind of pulled into the Green School orbit. And the focus was, before that, I kind of was looking at a manifesto as to what school could be. I was a principal, I was director of studies, and I came from a very pedagogic view on things. And in that process, I started to think, you know, that whole focus on are we just filling kids' brains and are we boring them to death? And I think the thing that really shook me was that, you know, I was looking at global results on surveys about engagement in learning, and it was going up from 48% disengaged, 50% disengaged, 52% disengaged. I mean, we've got kids who don't like school, and we've got kids who are anxious, overly anxious now. We've got this pandemic of schools that just sit trying to fill kids with information, and we're indoctrinated in it. So my whole focus was to come from a philosophical view of what if schools are actually about improving community, not just giving kids a mark or a selfishness of a career that will get them into making money. And to do that, you've got to be in community. So I came back from green school, and I started having people who wanted to start a green school in Byron, as everybody wants to start schools, and had all these people who wanted to back it, but it kind of nobody ever did. So I ended up buying my old house from my parents, and I built a school where my bedroom's now a walk through to a train. So yeah, so the Living School was born in 2020. I actually took 3 years to go through the NESA process of accreditation to get through. Most people get stopped at the DA process focus. You need a DA for a school, and this is an issue that we have to address as a country. Independence of education is important because biodiversity is good for nature. Biodiversity is really important for humanity. And we can't find places where you can start schools because they don't have the approval to operate as an educational institution. So I had to go through that, change my house into a DA for a school and get it approved. And 2020, I thought was great, 2020 vision. But that was just after the bushfires of the East Coast, where the whole of the East Coast was on fire. And then we hit COVID. And then last year, we were flooded out. We had the biggest historic flood in history, in European white people history. And yeah, I lost my whole school underwater. But because my school's a living school, we quickly flipped and we went down to the community hall and the local recreation parks and the beach. And we transported kids out of Lismore, out of the trauma scene, and ran a school where it just shows you don't need to have a building. In fact, you need to have people who want to be in community to create a school. So, the philosophy of the school is based around living, living well, living architecture, living learning, living food. I think, as I heard from Imogen, food is such an important part. And, companion is compane, is eating together, breaking bread together. So most schools don't do that. They have tuck shop where kids go and quickly eat, and then they're sitting on mobile phones as well. So we don't have technology up until like age 9. I think there's a real issue we have where people are now multimedia nannied. We have a K-4 school, and then we have a rite of passage into a 5, 6, 7, and 8, which is a project-based learning model, just starting with an incredible teacher, Emma Wilson. Then we're splitting into what I'm doing today is challenge-based learning. I think our teenagers in the dog years of the year 8, year 9s, the year 9s need to get out, and we need to get them into the bush, and we need them to feel emotionally challenged, because that actually grows you as a person and gives you that chance to build grit. And we know from Duckworth-Lee that grit is it. Then we go on to the academy, which we've got access to the university, Southern Cross University. And so we've got what we call Living Academy. And I want to create this program of a 3-year program where we don't get bound by the HSC and the pressure of cramming everything into 2 years. You can do it over 3 years. And then you can do pathways as well. The school, the heart of the school, is actually being rebuilt in the middle of the town. It's great to hear Brett, because I think, there's a network of people, really intelligent people who have specialized approaches to things that teachers don't have. And again, New South Wales has gone down this view of, you have to be accredited and registered, and you can't teach in a class unless you're supervised by an accredited teacher. And the classroom's in a school that's bound by a wall because we're all stranger danger fears. Whereas I think, an artisan program's really, really important, getting people connect with community and getting ins and outs of kids going in and coming out. Then I also realized when online learning came on, we had this online learning hit and everybody had to go online. I just don't like that. So we did on land learning, where we took kids to a farm. And now we've got this program every Friday. The whole school goes onto the farm, learns to surf, cook, hike. I can teach so much just sitting in a paddock with a rock. And then, when I start talking about the academy and the academic view, everyone says, oh, are you academic? Well, that's the peripatetic philosophy back in Athens, where it was the agora, the marketplace. So John Dewey was all about mindfulness, which was really about the habits of mind. How do we create good learning habits? We put kids in schools right now, and all of a sudden they're distracted, or they're noisy, or they're falling behind. And so they've got learning behaviors. But it's not. It's the behavior of us teaching to them or at them. So, can we shift things? And then I was looking at this whole idea of values and attitudes and skills, what are not the soft skills, the universal qualities of what make us work and successfully connect and interconnect as a social ecosystem. So values of respect, responsibility, and positive, productive relationships are the roots. Engagement, being keen to learn. The attitudes, which I call capacities, confidence, openness, resilience, excellence, passion, patience, positivity, perseverance, and then skills. And then looking at, how do you thread really good pedagogy in so that we can actually have some disruption in mainstream schooling? And it's great to hear these guys, because, when we talk about what are the alternate schools, you're going to hit Montessori and you're going to hit Steiner. And you might hit the democratic education schooling, A.S. Neil's, Summerhill later on, some of the democratic models that came out of Israel and places like that. But, if you think about it, Maria Montessori's school was 1909. That was her pedagogy. 1919 for the Waldorf school, for the Steiner schools. I know they've evolved since, but what's been the big shift in schooling? And then if you go, okay, we've got some issues we've got to address socially, emotionally, economically, environmentally, the only thing that's going to change anything is education. So I kind of have this legacy I want to leave of passion and patience and perseverance. And yeah, living school is living. It's chaotic, creative, sometimes works, sometimes falls over and fails. And, that's what we do.
I think the other word I might add to that there, John, is resilience, because honestly, the journey for you has certainly been one fraught with a few little challenges. And when you mentioned just then, I just want to put it to the audience as well, just to realize when you say flooded out. Now, the height of this building, I believe, is three stories high. Is that right?
Yeah.
And and the image that came through, you were it was almost the top floor that had been flooded. So how many meters of water are we talking about there? That was,
I think it was 14.5 meters of water all through the basin. It wasn't just in my building, it was everywhere. It was phenomenal what happened. But when people, I'm a positive person, Jen, that.
Absolutely.
And I think the worst problem you face is actually your best learning opportunity. So, when you walked around Lismore, all this detritus was piled on the streets and everyone's going, oh, that's terrible. And I'm going, no, because it got put there by people. Community came together as a result. And it's really good to be humble.
Absolutely.
Have reverence for nature, especially as we don't control it, it controls us.
Yeah.
And we've got great, passionate people who want to connect and want to be contributive. People talk about collective efficacy. I don't think it's a collection of trust. I think it's a contribution of trust. And that's an empowerment that we can do things different. We can make mistakes, but we can listen and we can shape, move and change, adapt, live.
Yeah, beautiful share. Thank you so much, John. I'm having a look at the questions that are coming through, and I'm going to open it to any of our three people here today. We did have a bit of a chat just before we came on, and we knew that one of the questions that were going to come up is just, how do you find a balance between requirements and your approach of and who would like to take the floor with that one?
Okay, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
I'll be brave.
I know.
There's no one from any education department.
Absolutely not. No, it stays here in our lovely little community.
I think, the trick for us, call it a trick, whatever you want, is we made the school about one narrow focus. And that focus is music. So, in terms of the curriculum, there's enough flexibility within the Queensland QCAA syllabuses to go, okay, we can make this about what we need to make it about. Without giving too much away that will get me into trouble, there are certain things that you don't actually have to do. You know, I learnt this from a good friend of mine. Many of you might have heard of him before, but Peter Hutton always said to me, just know the rules better than the boffins in at head office. So you can say to those boffins, no, it doesn't actually say that. It says this, and within that, I can do that, or I don't have to do that. I can do this. And so, you know, I'm saying this often lately. I tweet about it every now and again to the abyss because I get no replies or responses, so that's okay. We need brave educational leaders at the moment. That's what we need. Our kids are crying out for it. You know, John just talked about it. We talk about the COVID pandemic. What about the mental illness pandemic that we've got amongst our young people? It's rampant. And, you know, sending kids to school at 4 years of age or barely 5 years of age wasn't the answer. I mean, economically, the cynic in me says, keeps them out of childcare, so it's cheaper for the government to whack them into school. But if we've learned anything from education, and we look at, you know, everyone talks about Finland, they don't go till they're 7. And I reckon I've got a grandson, he's 2 and a bit, and I'm looking at him going, no, there's no way you're going to school when you're 4, mate. No way in the world. It's tantamount to child abuse for me. I deal with the other end. I've got a senior school where I've got kids who are doing their 13th year of school, and they are over it. They are over repeating the same formulaic assessment pieces. Kids will say to me, Brett, we did an extended response last year in year 11. Why have we been doing one again? I'm like, well, because the syllabus says you have to. And if you don't, you know, and we make it as palatable as possible because our assignments are about what they're passionate about. But my goodness, you know, we had kids on stage last night. We did our annual showcase at the Trifford, which is one of Brisbane's premier venues, 800 capacity. We sold it out for the 6th year in a row. Our kids got up and performed like seasoned professionals. None of that's accessible. What a joke. We've got kids who produce television content to YouTube that is professional standard. Film and TV, not accessible, doesn't fit the criteria. You're not making some, you know, absurd French cinema. So therefore we can't assess you on that, but it's real world and they're getting real audience. It's just bizarre. So we've transitioned to a micro-credentialing system as well.
Okay.
That we're using Credly, and we give badges to our kids. We do our mandatory reporting on our subjects. We take the focus off grades. I tell kids, I don't care about grades. If you're a happy, healthy person who's an active learner, grades will take care of themselves. They'll just follow you along. You don't have to stress about them. And so our senior report now is an exit statement where the kids write half of it, collective staff write the other half, and then their badges are there. And down the very bottom in the fine print, if you want to read it, there's their grades. Because legally we have to report on that. So we do. So that's a few kind of tips about, for me, I think you need to make it unique to your context. Like I've listened to Imogen and John, and they're very different to us, similar in philosophy, but very different in what they're doing. And I think that's the key as well. Don't try and be someone else, be uniquely you, and find the pockets of the envelope that you can stretch, you know, and if they poke open and there's a hole there, maybe someone will notice at some point. But my experience is they're not looking for those holes.
Right. Thank you so much, Brett. Imogen, would you like to share a little bit?
Well, I think, you know, it is a difficult question, and we all do need to find our own ways. But I think for us, keeping at the centre what it is that the individual students in our school at this time need, and really honouring that and making sure that that what they're doing is meeting their needs is the core, and then we just have to deal with the bureaucracy around it.
Absolutely. And just to that point, I just want to come back to an earlier point before we lose this in why I've got you on the call here. Imogen, you talked a little bit about the mixed grouping. So I'm just curious, could you explore that a little bit more with us, of what that looks like at Peregrine? Mixed age.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's from the very first day been one of the really essential features of the school. And as I said, it's about community, but it's also about what I have sort of called removing the norm. You know, when you've got a group of same age children, or even, you know, 2 years or 3 years, there's some implied, even if it's not explicit, there's an implied concept of what students or children at that age should be doing, or should be ready for, or, you know, And having really broadly mixed age groups just smashes that. And I think so for me, that's one of the core strengths of the model, and why we will hang on to it. So the children at the school, the young people at the school, they know that what you're doing is dependent on what you're interested in, what you're ready for, and what, what's been negotiated with you, and that it is absolutely never dependent on how old you are, what grade you're in. So there are these mentor groups that we have that are really very big. So they're, from the kindergarten to the grade 6 in the primary school. They're from grade 7 or 6 to grade 10 in the high school. They spend substantial parts of their learning day in those groups. But then the rest of the day, whether it's a literacy class and a numeracy group, a unit that they're doing, whether that's, I think there's one of the primary school groups at the moment have chosen to learn about extinction. Another group are doing soon a unit called intergenerational conversations that one of the teachers has come up with, and it's accessible to anybody. So whoever's interested is in that group. So they spend the entirety of their day in groups where there are wide ranges of ability. So the norm in our setting is that everyone's different. Everyone's at a different stage.
Oh, wonderful.
There's no, I guess the word adjustments in the NCCD world, is the thing that I will really hold firmly, that word should not be necessary. It should definitely not be necessary in our setting. It shouldn't be necessary, I don't believe, in other settings, because it presumes that you've got some preconceived idea about what somebody should be doing, or that everybody's doing one thing and that some people are not able to do that, so you must do something different for them. If you start from the perspective that you're planning for each of the students or the cohorts as individuals, you don't need that concept.
Beautiful response. Thank you so much, Imogen. I'm going to shift over to John there. And John, again, I'll come back, circle to that question again. I'd love to hear your response.
Yeah, so the first thing is New South Wales is pretty strict on how things happen. As I said, it took 3 years to get through. So the first thing is you have to know what you're dealing with. As Brett said, you have to know it better than them. And you've got March 31st cutoff. It's a RANGS online system you have to upload to. You need to know your policies. You need to have space. You need to have a building with a library to be a school, which is a bit weird. And then, when you look at NESA is not this dark angel that sits over you and tries to stop you from doing things. It's just standards. Standards are not there to make you excellent. Standards are there for people to get over. So, the first thing is understanding you've got to, teach the outcomes, assess the outcomes, and the outcomes are pretty broad things, and you can group them together. The other thing is, as Brett was saying, there's nothing in the Australian Education Act to say how long a school day should be. So you could start a day at 11. You can have your day end Friday, after school, 1 o'clock, and then all of a sudden you can have after school teachers, after school staff, and there's loads of lateral ways to do things. So the big thing is the financing. I had to raise the finance myself. As I said, no one helped. But Australia is really fortunate in that you can get government funding and support, but you just got to know how to do it. And every child enrolled in Australia gets funding, as well as we have fees on top of that, and we have to manage the teacher's budget. So you also got to know how to financially run a school, and you need to run a school on about, a good school is running on 65 to 70% budget is teacher's salary or staff salary. So you've got to know the business. We're business-like, but we're not-for-profit. You've got to start with a not-for-profit in the first place. You've got to get a really good governance structure, and your constitution is key. Because community schools implode at times. I'm sure Imogen's had a little bit of that, where people very emotively, politically want to change things, and we're all indoctrinated. So you find teachers and parents change schools, and it's when you have the children's voice overriding that you've got more chance of succeeding in holding it to and honor the agency of the child. You know, our school, we have 6-week terms. So we have 6 terms of 6 weeks, and each of our terms has a keystone theme. So we do project-based, inquiry-based learning. So every term 1, our students, as they get older, have to cycle through an understanding of a keystone question, inquiry question around identity. And then it's nature, life and living, civilization, phenomena, service. And so they're going to leave our school with 6 big key ideas. Now, those inquiry questions are buried in the NESA New South Wales syllabuses, in HSIE, in science, in PDH. So you just have to know the syllabuses and dig into them. They're great. You know, I'm actually all for that stuff, because it's about, okay, this is the balsa wood, how do I make an airplane fly? You know, so you shouldn't be fearing that, but you've got to remember, you know, I've had a lot of people say, how come I want to start a school? And I say, well, it's not like opening a cafe, a fish and chip shop. You know, like, it's not a 5-year thing and then you can give it up. You know, you're in it. You know, Imogen, Brett, it's not something that you're going to just all of a sudden say, okay, I've got there and that was fun. You know, you're giving something to a community, a legacy that you're going to have to commit to, you know, every day of the week, pretty much. You know, this is the reality of it. So I guess to spin back to, how do you meet the requirements? You know what the requirements are.
Yeah.
How do you open a school? You've got to be passionate enough to believe in it and want to see it, because what drives you isn't the business. What drives you is the sense that you want to make lives better. And I think once you've for change, it doesn't matter what you go through, because you're doing good.
Amazing. Look, John, I actually think we're going to bring that to an end there. That last comment there of just wanting to make things better, and leaving that legacy piece has come through so strongly today. I know I walk away from this conversation today feeling truly inspired. It's one I've been looking forward to for many, many weeks. Imogen, Brett and John, I could be more thankful of your time. I know, like, John, you're right there in the middle of a camp. You've got your year 9s. You're probably looking out the window going, all right, are you still
I've got to
there?
drive back to that and take the glowworm cave.
It has been truly inspiring. 3 very different schools, and super, just wonderful to just be able to spend time with the 3 of you. And for all of us here today on this Wednesday afternoon, I truly hope you all walk away feeling as inspired as I do. Thank you all for joining us. Just before you do dash, we will send an email follow-up with the recording of this live learning session, which you're more than welcome to share with other staff members that haven't been able to join us today. We'll be back here on the 27th of July to continue with this theme of our live learning, where we're looking at doing things differently in schools. So please do mark your calendars. Thursday, the 27th of July, we'll be back here at 4 p.m, and more details around that will be in an email to you. Thank you to our 3 guests. If you're able to stay on the line, that would be amazing. We would love to have a quiet chat. I'm going to officially bring this session to a close. You're getting comments in the chat. You are trailblazers. You are inspiring. We've got thank yous, awesomeness. Wonderful. What an afternoon. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm going to press.